Welcome, everybody. This is Movie Geeks United. I'm Dean Treadway, and tonight we're going to be celebrating the 35th anniversary of one of the great neo-noir film classics of the 1980s, Cutter's Way, and we're delighted to be joined in our discussion by its star, the always terrific John Heard. In the film, directed by Czech filmmaker Ivan Passer, Heard was tapped to play Alex Cutter, a Vietnam War veteran who's been scarred both mentally and physically by his war experience. Living in drunken squalor with his depressed wife, Mo, played brilliantly by Lisa Eichhorn, Alex Cutter is shaken back into life when his best friend, a lazy sailboat salesman named Richard Bone, played by Jeff Bridges, one night accidentally witnesses a man disposing of a dead body in a dark L.A. alley. After the girl's corpse is discovered, Bone is exhaustively questioned by the police, but contends he didn't really see anything. Slowly, though, Bone does begin to realize that it's the powerful oil tycoon, J.J. Cord, played with menace by Stephen Elliott, who is responsible for the girl's death. But because the man is so wealthy, Bone doesn't think it wise to pursue the matter. But Cutter, with half of his body still crippled from the war, feels a powerful need to bring the man to justice as kind of a payback for all the rich men who sent soldiers to fight wars so they could get even richer. Heard brings an acerbic power to the physically demanding role, playing Cutter as an alternately repellent and heroic pirate hungry for something true and right. Heard had been acting on the New York stage all throughout the 70s and had begun doing movies late in that decade, starting with Joan Micklin Silver's ensemble post-hippie comedy Between the Lines, and then continuing to work with Silver in an adaptation of Ann Beattie's novel Chilly Seas of Winter. That movie, a chronicle of a failed obsessive romance co-starring Mary Beth Hurt, was ultimately titled Head Over Heels upon its 1979 release, but then Silver and the studio, United Artists, pulled the film, rejiggered it with a new downbeat ending, which was different from the happy one in the book in the original movie, and then re-released it in 1982 with the original title, Chilly Seas of Winter. And from there, it garnered a fervent cult following. Heard followed that with a notable portrayal of Jack Kerouac in the beatnik biopic Heartbeat, co-starring Nick Nolte and Sissy Spacek. But it's his performance as Alex Cutter that's brought him the most praise. The film feels like it's only now getting the high reputation it deserves, having recently been re-released on Blu-ray by Twilight Time. And most critics agree that Heard's ferocious performance really should have netted him the Best Actor Oscar that year. Heard has hundreds of credits to his name, and the list of great movies he's contributed to is quite impressive. On the Yard, Heaven Help Us, Paul Schrader's Cat People, Chud, Big, Awakenings, The Trip to Bountiful, Beaches, Rambling Rose, In the Line of Fire, the great and neglected classic Mind Walk with Liv Ullmann and Sam Waterston, The Pelican Brief, Snake Eyes, Ed Harris's movie of Pollock, The Animal Factory, directed by Steve Buscemi, Sweetland, and of course Home Alone, for which he's probably most famous for playing Macaulay Culkin's father. And he's made great contributions to television in the past decades, most notably in HBO's comedy series Entourage, in Fox's drama series Prison Break, and in David Chase's groundbreaking series The Sopranos, where he played the troubled New York detective Vin Makazian. But tonight, though we do touch on Chilly Seas of Winter and The Sopranos, we're concentrating mostly on Cutter's Way and his relationship with his co-stars, Jeff Bridges and Lisa Eichhorn, his interplay with director Ivan Passer, and his insights into this complex character's motivations. It's a funny and often frank self-assessment Mr. Heard offers up to us, and we hope you'll enjoy listening in on our conversation. Here we go. I know that the director of Cutter's Way, Ivan Passer, had first seen you in a production of Othello that Joseph Papp was putting on in Central Park, and he was pretty insistent having you play Alex Cutter. Did he ever discuss with you exactly why, from that particular performance, he thought you'd be perfect for the role?
If he did, I don't remember it, but he did say, why is he for this other boy Bone? Why he should be for Cutter? And then
that's a pretty good Czech accent.
Yeah, I don't know. Where is Ivan these days? Hope he's still with us.
I hope so too. It's funny. I haven't seen a Ivan Passer movie in quite some time. So, but I know that the film had a pretty difficult pre-production history. Originally, it was going to be with Robert Mulligan directing, and then Dustin Hoffman was going to play Alex Cutter. That would have been interesting. I'm curious, like, when you were approached by Ivan, did you know his work, or did you even know the book by Newton Thornburg or anything like that?
I read the book. I don't know when I read it. I was friends with Paul Gurian, I think. I became friends with him, probably. I think he was the first person who approached me. I don't think, or maybe Ivan was with him. I really don't remember. But it was pretty much Ivan, I think, who said, let's read him for the part of Cutter. And this is funny because I was always peculiar. And that happened repeatedly. That I was, maybe, as a matter of fact, I remember a Newsweek review once that compared me to a crossover between Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman. Now that you brought Dustin Hoffman up, which is a pretty, that's a mutant, man. You know, that's like... How do you mesh those two into one person?
Yeah, that's but you know, in a way I can see where they're going with that. I mean, to me, you've always had a kind of a likable cynicism to a lot of your earlier roles in particular. And so I would imagine that, you know, maybe they had seen you in Chilly Seeds of Winter, or what was then Head Over Heels. There's something about the character of Charles in Chilly Seeds of Winter that if Charles had actually gone to the war, he might have ended up being like Alex Cutter. When you went about starting to forge this character, I would imagine the makeup and the costuming help. The makeup is very... I see that they put like a scar a little bit underneath your eye.
A piece of plastic prosthetic is a scar, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
What was the makeup guy's name? He was a savior. Can't remember. He later married Lisa Oakhorn. He's a great guy. I can't remember his name. He was the son of somebody very famous. He was famous. I'm too old to remember.
All the costuming must have really helped you get into the role, I would imagine. But also, did you talk to paraplegic war veterans or anything in preparation for it?
No. I didn't. I had been in a couple of Vietnam plays, one of which was called Streamers, and the other one was called GR Point. I had seen, it was very, very, I don't know if, what's the movie that Robert De Niro and Chris Walken did? I think one evening they were...
Deer Hunter? Yeah.
Yeah, Deer Hunter. I'd been in for that, and I wasn't right for the Walken part. And then, actually, one evening I saw Bobby De Niro and Chris Walken standing at a long bar in a bar that used to be right on Broadway in the 70s. It's a very popular place for actors at one point, big, huge room. And they were chit-chatting between themselves, and that with them was a actual Vietnam veteran. So the onus was really on me. You know, I didn't have any pretensions about being one of that ilk. You know, I didn't go to Vietnam. I'm glad I did, and I'm sorry for the guys that did. So it was a much more of a political and socioeconomic, if you will, kind of crisis that I felt very, very responsible for. I felt like, you know, so I wanted to stay very close to the outrage and the anger in this, what is actually a kind of a affluent guy who grew up, you know, wherever in Santa Barbara or something, which I was totally unfamiliar with, but, you know, yacht clubbing, and Bone was sort of a pretty boy around the jet set. And I guess I was, you know, I was upper middle class and had been shipped out and came back with half a body. And there wasn't anybody I could really reach out to say, hey, what happened to you in Vietnam? Has anything like that happened? No, I'm just asking. So I didn't really know where to go off and search for that. But as actors, we had been so familiarized with various screenplays and plays that really brought us up to date. G.R. Point was very much a play that was done at the Manhattan Theater or whatever it was, and it was actually set in Vietnam. So you learned the lingo, and you learned a lot about what was going on in Vietnam at that particular period. So when he comes back, I focused mostly on his outrage, saying what he said in the script, that these guys just send others off to their capitalist wars and come back mutilated and hurt and suicidal, and he felt the need to get even, to put J.J. Cord where he belonged in the trash can along with that poor girl. So it wasn't so much about. It was about Vietnam. It was about what had happened to him in Vietnam, but there wasn't a whole backlog of Vietnam-type stuff.
Yes.
And I didn't know if it wasn't worth at the time comical.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of humor in it. I mean, Alex can be pretty unmanageable and reprehensible at times, but he's also quite funny, and I guess the humor must have helped you find a way to keep the character likable.
Yeah, well, I wasn't trying to. I got criticized a bit from friends and so on and so forth for not being hardcore enough or macho enough or something like that. But I sort of saw him as, it wasn't Escape from New York, and,
yeah.
It was more of an upper middle class guy that just had enough education to know that what was going down was wrong.
Mm-hmm. What's interesting about the movie is I've never read the original book, but I imagine there's a much more detailed backstory to the relationship between Alex and Richard, played by Jeff Bridges, and of course Mo, played by Lisa Eichhorn, who I just think is incredible in the movie. She's just, you're all great at it, but she's heartbreaking in it. So did you and Jeff and Lisa Eichhorn discuss the backstory very much, and can you talk a little bit about that?
No, not much. Actually, Yvonne didn't want a lot of rehearsal. He didn't like he didn't like a lot of it. It's not that he didn't like it. He just thought he didn't need it. He felt like just do it. Just go with your gut. Got a director that I felt that he was, and I was easily the most petulant and the most difficult on the set. And
in what way?
I was a real pain in the ass, physically and emotionally and mentally. I was drinking, and I was very caught up in the kind of the alcoholic lifestyle. That and then my wife wanted to, and my assumption was we were childhood sweethearts and we were bonded, and then she comes home with a couple big bags of groceries, and it's like, what are you thinking? And I kind of wanted to go nuts in that area, like this guy had just gone down the path after this Holocaust in Vietnam of total self abuse and alcoholism and the whole nine yards. So, Alex is really going off this time, and that seemed to be a lot of the movie was that I was having some sort of paranoid fantasy or something about something that Bones just grunts one afternoon while watching a parade. Right. And that brings to light the triangulation in their relationship and how I'm somebody that walk, and, he's always copping out and running off and not taking responsibility. And here it is in this movie. It sort of has a tragic turn in that respect when he jumps on my wife and she ends up killing herself, but she didn't kill herself. And I know that. And the person that was probably the most instrumental to me in the whole process was the producer, Paul Gurian.
Mm-hmm.
He had developed the screenplay, I think, with Jeffrey Fishkin. I read the book, and the book was much more hardcore. They were almost
Yes.
like the impression that I got from the book was that they were kind of like almost white trash.
Mm. Okay.
I don't know if I'm right. I mean, I could get in trouble for saying that, but the book just seemed to be much more along the lines of them being being desperados, you know. And I think I remember the book opens up with you know, Alex going off on some biker or somebody, just being sitting in a bar, being sort of suicidal, you know, taking anybody on and getting the crap beat out of them. And I didn't get that whole yacht club world. So
yeah,
we should have. I think that Lisa and myself, I think, wanted more discussion and more rehearsal, but Yvonne was much more. You know, Yvonne's the funny story I have about Yvonne Passer is that he would, after every take, he would say, "That was wonderful." And then he'd say, "Do it again." And you'd go like, "Okay." And he'd say, that was super. Do it again." And finally, one time I went over to him afterwards and I said, "You know, the first take was wonderful and the second take was superb. Why are we doing it again? I mean, if superb and wonderful is pretty good, isn't it? What else could it be?" And he looked at me, and after a moment, he looked at me and said, "It could be fantastic." So that was pretty much the way he left it.
I mean, that's a lot of the way that, say, Stanley Kubrick worked. You know, he was always just he always was looking for something just different. You know, just so.
I think he trusted his actors, but I wasn't good. I was not working a lot in film. Didn't have the patience. I had one arm tied behind me. I had a patch over the other eye, and I was an asshole for the most part. Standing around waiting for them to light something I didn't appreciate, and you had this wonderful director of photography, Jordan Cronworth, who actually was crippled, if that's the right word, from an automobile accident. So it was a real test of wills, you know, to wait for him to, and then it was again Paul Gurian who came over to me at one point and he said, "You have no idea, this man is making you look good. This man is making this movie look fantastic." And you have no appreciation.
He did make it look fantastic. The film has that dreamy kind of quality that kind of ushered in an era of a different kind of look, a kind of a smoky kind of look to things.
Absolutely.
Did Passer and Cronenweth ever discuss with you their sort of visual strategy for the movie, or is that something that was outside of your?
He was in his own world, and he was light years ahead of me, and I was just punk. I was just somebody that was chomping at the bits because of the dialogue. I was just much more, I guess you'd even say, theatrically oriented. You know, to me, it was in the language.
You just wanted to get on with it.
Yeah, I needed to get on with it because it was physically demanding, and then of course the person that I was yelling at was actually physically not he was actually walking around limping with a cane and hunched over because of the tragedy of his life in an accident. So who is going to listen to me?
I would imagine you used a lot of that anger you channeled a lot of that anger into the performance.
Yeah, I did. But then it's a question of how attractive are you when you're angry? Get into that kind of self-consciousness, like maybe George C. Scott is great when he's angry, but maybe John Hurd looks like a wounded bird or something when he's angry. So, you have to do your homework. You have to learn about film. You can't just waltz in and do a movie unless you're Marlon Brando or somebody. It was difficult for me, and I was pissed off because they made me shoot the gun at some stuffed animal that looked ridiculous. I thought that mouse in the water was not. Come on, give me something like a lion or. I
mean, let's face it. I think you knocked it out of the park playing the role. So whatever, and I think most people do. But do you think that maybe if you had been in a few more films before you had done this, that you would have attacked it differently, or?
I'd like to say yes, but I had been in, and I was just as cantankerous doing them them as I was doing this, and I don't know. I don't know. I never went to dailies. I never saw myself, and I always wanted to leave and go back to New York City and do a play. So I hated L.A. and I didn't want to stay here.
Yeah.
And I think that had a tremendous impact on my career, for better or for worse. And maybe I could have been a better actor, on film, and I was relying too much on my success on stage, and there's no comparison. And people try to make this comparison between working in the theater and working on film, and there's no comparison. You want to be good at anything, you got to do your homework.
Yeah.
And I didn't learn about lenses. I didn't learn about lamps. I didn't learn about the time it takes to take the time to take the take and all that kind of stuff. And it was difficult to work with, and in that respect, I was impatient and intolerant. And this is my confession.
Well, we'll take
that's
it.
probably why I don't work anymore. I don't know.
Well, you're working all the time.
I haven't had a serious job for 10 years. I think my last serious job was on Elementary on TV in New York City.
You don't consider Sharknado serious?
No, Sharknado was great. I love Sharknado.
Back to Cutter's Way, Yvonne Passer says that he thinks that the film was assassinated by the studio. That's his word. And do you think there was a sense of possibly? I know I'm reaching here, but is there a sense that maybe it was a movie that needed to be suppressed in some way because of its kind of bold and bald statement about American involvement and in the war and so forth, and or do you think it got poor treatment just due to economics? Because I know it was a United Artists movie, and they were going through troubles with Heaven's Gate and so forth. So,
an article in the New York Times this past weekend or something about Heaven's Gate, and they didn't have the money, and that's what kind of created the classical genre of movies that they weren't going to, publicize and produce. They kind of created a separate category for them, and it's kind of gone on from there to probably create the whole indie world of making smaller movies and spending lots and lots and lots of money as compared to what Hollywood spends today making a major motion picture.
Yeah.
And I think it was of that ilk. I mean, it wasn't touted to be a blockbuster, I don't know who that was. You got Jeff Bridges, but I don't think Lisa was any big, and I certainly wasn't any big name. So we were kind of always, I always felt we were always a kind of come from behind film. And it did get out there, and I think in this article I read that a friend sent me on Facebook, some people did see it and they didn't like it. They didn't think it was so great.
I read a review this morning from Vincent Canby, who reviewed it, and it seemed like he had not even watched the movie. It really just confounded me. His review. He says that the screenplay didn't make any sense, and I said I don't see how it could be any more clearer. So I really don't understand any kind of negative reaction to it. But then again, a lot of critics came back when it was retitled Cutter's Way, because it was originally titled Cutter and Bone, just for the audience here. But when it was retitled and re-released, it got better reviews, which is kind of strange.
Which is the same thing with Chilly Scenes of Winter, which was the book title by Ann Beattie, and then it came out with Head Over Heels.
Yes.
And I guess there's just no accounting for taste.
Yeah.
Cutter and Bone to me is a much more savvy title and a much hipper kind of presentation in itself. Cutter and Bone. I mean, I want to go see that just for the title.
Yeah.
And Chilly Scenes of Winter is a lot more interesting than Head Over Heels. Sounds like an Annette Funicello and Frankie Avalon movie.
It must have been, to bring in Chili Season Winter here for just a second, it must have been very strange for you coming from stage and getting into film, and here it is two of your first major films go through some major rejiggering. Yeah, you must have had a very skewed idea of what the film business was.
Well, like, they don't like me. I'm not used to it.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I was so busy hightailing it out of here that I didn't look back.
Yeah.
And I was in a certain respect, I was relieved. I didn't have any idea of what it was like to be in a majorly successful movie.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any idea of what it was like to be recognized on the street or be acknowledged as a contender for film parts, big parts, leading parts.
Mm-hmm.
So I was on the one hand, I was extremely grateful that, as we characterized it in the 70s, we said your career either did or didn't get a first class airplane ticket to Hollywood. And mine did, and then I kind of always sort of felt like, well, I kind of came out here and blew it. Then I had the theater, and thank God I was from New York. Yeah, because I could always go home, I could always go back to the bar on 72nd Street and say, well,
Yeah, those assholes.
My father always said to me, earn the respect of your peers. He said that to me, and I went, what does he mean? What the hell is he talking about? My peers were very much my friends and fellow actors that worked on the stage. That was those were my peers. So I didn't, I wasn't going to stack myself up against Warren Beatty and Robert Redford. So it wasn't really that much of a loss. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And our generation of actors was mostly Bobby De Niro and Al Pacino.
I think you're one of the most interesting actors out there, but your work in the '80s is just superb, and even going on to things like Mind Walk, and which is one of my favorites of your movies. I still think you're doing great stuff. I mean, and in the Sopranos, in particular, I think you're terrific.
I would like to play some great character someday, maybe, but I'm old now.
Hey, old character actors do some of the great work of all time. So
Yeah, I'd like another shake at it before I go, but doesn't seem to be happening. So it's nice to be remembered to belonging to a certain period of time and let it go at that. Most people see me, and I'm surprised when they see me on the street and they recognize me from Home Alone. So even that's 20 years ago.
Yeah, I think that with Cutter's Way and with Chili Season Winter, also with even On the Yard, which I just recently watched On the Yard again for the first time it's on Amazon Prime, and I finally got to see that for the first time, and I thought that was very good as well. And I love Heartbeat too, where you play Jack Kerouac. I think that's vastly underrated. Vastly underrated. And of course, Between the Lines, which is another fantastic. Your work with Joan Micklin Silver was superb. Can you talk a little bit about her? Because I don't think enough people know about her work, and I think
she was like one of Joan Darling and Joan Micklin Silver were probably two of the first female directors, and she was directing a Paramount, I think it was, with Chili Scenes.
Yeah.
And that was a big deal, man, to hire a female director. And she wrote with her husband On the Yard and the other one you mentioned, Between the Lines. She was a very quiet director, and one time I was sitting in the bathtub Peter Riegert was my buddy in chili scenes, and whenever he came around, I would throw stuff at him and shoot him with the bow and arrow, or squirt him with the water pistol, or squirt water on him or something. And Joan said, "John, can we do that again without all the other stuff? Just do the same. Don't throw things at Peter." And I said, "Well, what do you mean? I thought that doing all that stuff was funny." And Joan Micklin looked at me and she said, "It's not funny, John. It's just goofy."
But you still managed to get some of that goofiness in the movie, I think.
That was it for Joan and me. It was like, goofy? You mean I'm just goofy? They were great to me, and she's a sweetheart. I love her, and she can be. You think that she's not really, she's not liking you or something. She can be sort of standoffish, but she's really just, I think, shy. She's not of the how shall you describe it? The auteur director league. She's just a ordinary kind of gal that has a pension gift. And I don't think you're absolutely right. I think she doesn't get she doesn't really get Hester Street and Between the Lines and stuff and chili scenes and stuff. And she was a pioneer.
Yeah. Do you feel like with Cutter's Way? Do you feel like now that it's gotten a recent Blu-ray release, sort of a limited edition, and I think it's already sold out? But do you feel like the moment has arrived where the film is hailed as the great movie that it really should have been hailed as back in the early '80s?
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea. I haven't kept up with any of that. But like I say, a friend of mine sent me a thing on Facebook that there was an article written about interdit movies, that the French call them forbidden movies. And one of them was about something about garbage or something, and the other one was Cutter's Way. So maybe somebody's going to come along and say this film speaks to the post-Vietnam era, and film noir stature. I don't know. That would be nice. Be nice for everybody that was involved in it, because they gave it their heart and soul. Jordan Cronenberg and Paul Gurian and Yvonne Passer and Jeffrey Fishkin, and I think that they were more upset by its lack of popularity than we as actors were. I think they were much more invested in bringing that kind of movie to an American audience. There was a lot of words in Cutter's Way. There was a lot of dialogue. And I remember people making a point of that. I remember Jeffrey Fishkin making a point, and the producer Paul Gurian making a point of that. There was a lot of verbal exchange back and forth. And there was one moment when there was a pretty powerful scene. It was supposed to be anyway, and then Jeff Bridges ad-libbed saying, "Oh, no, not the leg again. Please don't make the leg speech." And that was an ad-lib that was he threw in there, and maybe because, he wasn't used to that kind of back, and he wasn't, there was just a lot of, whatever you call it, dialogue that was supposed to go back and forth between the characters. And I don't think that was that wasn't the usual back then. Things got pared down, Things get pared down.
Yeah.
I think cable TV actually today is bringing that kind of back. Actors are much more in command by virtue of what's coming out of their mouth, as opposed to X-Men, on cable.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff that I see that I couldn't do. It would take me a year to memorize some of that stuff that's coming out of today's actors' mouths. The
well, I mean, did you? You had some your experience on the Sopranos. What was that like?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, there was a scene in which I'm supposed to describe. I think it's my last scene before I jump off the bridge or something like that. And we had a night, and I was going on about how this speech one thing doesn't flow into the other. And the writers, God bless them, they were actually listening to me. and they thought that was, insightful. Later, they used me in a pilot that didn't go, so I don't know if they still have that opinion of what I was talking about. But at the time, they were like impressed, and I think James Gandolfini looked at them and said, I can't believe you're listening to this guy. Go along. He's just an actor, and it was funny. It was funny that you mentioned that, because that's what ended up in Sopranos for me. Was They gave me a big chunk of words, and I was looking at the first paragraph and saying, how do I get to the second paragraph when I talk about just about killing myself, or my girlfriend was a whore, a prostitute, and with them, they were looking at me and scratching their heads and going, "You mean we didn't write it? We didn't write it well enough?" And I'm going like, I just don't know how to make this transition, And they were going like, "What's a transition?" So maybe that's my problem. Maybe I just talk too much. Just say the long one. Just say what's down on the paper.
Perhaps so. But for me, it's never been a problem. You're always great. And let me ask you one more question. I have to ask this just as a fan. With Chili Seeds of Winter, and I want to talk about the ending, of course. The two different endings. There's the ending where you're actually, which is actually available on YouTube somewhere. Someone put it up there. The original ending of Head Over Heels has them together. They get together again, Charles and Laura. And then, of course, at the end of Chili Seeds of Winter, you confront her and say, "Are you coming? Are you going to be with me?" And she says, "No, not really." And then you part, and all that happens is all we see at the end of the movie is you running. You're running, trying to run off the hurt.
I actually think they both work. One says one thing that is supported by the rest of the film, and the other one says another thing that can be also supported by the.
I just think that's incredibly fascinating, because I can't think of another movie that has this feature of this another film story that has really two different endings that were released out. It was released to the public. I find it fascinating, and I find the movie fascinating too, just for a variety of different reasons. And mostly, the movie is great because of the Joan Micklin Silver's unusual editing, the sort of flashbacks within flashbacks that are going on, and then of course your amazing interplay with Mary Beth Hurt and the rest of the cast too. I mean, it's an amazing cast, but your scenes with Mary Beth Hurt are just electrifying in that film, and particularly the meeting scene.
I have a girlfriend who, when we're not together, she lives 300 miles away. She says she watches me in Chili Seeds of Winter.
Mm-hmm. She does. Just to refamiliarize herself with you.
Yeah. I guess there's something in the relationship that works for her, that she puts herself in the Mary Beth role or something, and it's like having me around.
Well, that's kind of sweet. That speaks to the power of the movie, I think.
If I had to choose one, I think I would choose the one where it doesn't, he doesn't get the girl.
Uh-huh.
Because of the quality of his life, because of the character of his mother and his, I like olives.
Yeah.
And all the peculiarities of his life, and she's not. I don't know. There's not enough of her in her own world to match them up.
Uh-huh.
Besides that, he talks about her. He talks about her like she's an obsession.
Yeah.
Not like she's a person. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, like
and
to
I
the
think
cause.
the movie stands up on the fact that it's like this is what it's like to be maybe obsessively in love with somebody rather than realistically in love.
Yeah.
That plays,
And that's,
I think, more truly through the film than the fantasy fulfillment of being obsessed with something that actually works out.
yeah.
There's supposed to be a note of him being, and I didn't know if I even picked up on this when I was doing it, but there's supposed to be a difference between being obsessed with somebody and really actually loving them.
Yeah.
You know, go figure. I don't know. You take your pick. I don't know. You know, whichever one you like. I mean, but if you fell in love with somebody today and you chased them around for a year and they were married and, you know, they said, hey, buzz off, you know, that's pretty much an obsession.
Yes.
You know? But if they said, okay, and they came around for a while and they went back to their husband and you were still in love with them, then I guess you would want it to work out.
Yeah. And plus, you know, her character in the film, you know, is she hasn't explored enough of her own life on her own, you know.
Yeah, right.
So it makes more sense for her to want to do that before she gets involved with anybody else. And maybe the waters have been poisoned so far, you know, at that point for Charles and Laura, and it could never work out anyway. So I actually prefer the sadder ending.
Great.
You know,
it's like maybe movies for the price of one.
Yeah. I'd love to see a Criterion Collection, you know, redo of Chili Seeds of Winter, where
they had the same thing. They had the same problem with Cutter's Way.
They didn't know how to end it. How were they going to? Was there another ending that was not used?
I think the other ending was when he just crashes through the window and dies, or well, he dies anyway. But the Cord is not the bad guy or something. The fact is that while we were shooting the movie, they didn't really know how they were going to end it, like what the ending was going to be. Whether Alex was just nuts or whether he was really onto something.
I read somewhere too that there was maybe like some intimation that Arthur Rosenberg, you know, the guy that plays the J.J. Cord, you know, helper or whatever, that he was involved with the murder and that he actually committed the murder instead of Cord. There was some possibility of that being in the film, but Yvonne Passer decided that it would be better to end it the way it ended.
That's another aspect of my career. They don't know how to end my movies.
They just don't want to say bye to you, John. I want to tell you, it's been a thrill talking to you, and I want to thank you for your generosity and for your films. I'm not kidding. There's tons of your work that I'm not even touching on that I love, like Heaven Help Us and again Mind Walk and Big and so many movies. So I just want to thank you so much for your work. And
well, thank you very much. I'm very flattered, and it's been fun talking to you.